I still remember being a wee lad in 1989 and Batman being like the biggest thing in the world. I remember getting all my friends together, sitting at the lunch table, like trading Batman cards, wanting to get the Batman cups from like McDonald's and stuff like that. Literally had Batman fever back in 1989. And I've loved superhero comic book movies for a long time. Now, I've seen some really bad ones, but they're not going to make this list. This is the 5 worst comic book movie fails, but I'm not really going to consider Batman and Robin. It was too early on. They didn't take superhero movies all that seriously. I'm not going to put Steel on the list, even though it might be the worst one of all time. I'm not going to put Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, which is absolutely an abomination. I'm going to take movies that have been more modern that obviously I've seen. I can't put Catwoman on the list from Halle Berry because I didn't see it. But there were a couple of movies that didn't quite make the list but are atrocious. Suicide Squad, really bad movie, but the first like 20, 25 minutes are actually pretty good. And then it just gets terrible. And then Blade Trinity. I love Blade 2. It's in my top 5 of all time. Blade Trinity is a really bad movie, but there's one performance by Ryan Reynolds that almost makes the movie bearable. Other than that, it's actually pretty terrible. So now let's talk about From Hype to Heartbreak, the 5 biggest comic book movie fails. In my opinion, this is the list. Released May 26, 2006, X-Men The Last Stand is widely considered a low point in the franchise, directed by Brett Ratner. After Bryan Singer's exit, the film tries to juggle the Dark Phoenix saga and the Mutant Cure storyline, ultimately failing at both. The plot is a mess, emotional beats fall flat, and key characters like Cyclops and Professor X are killed off without impact or respect. Jean Grey's Phoenix transformation is hollow and unearned, leaving fans frustrated. Compared to Singer's earlier work, The Last Stand lacks focus, heart, and vision. Cyclops' abrupt death became the poster child for how not to treat legacy characters. And I still remember like 2000, I think that's when it was. I was stationed in England. My buddy Steve was so excited about this X-Men movie. We go and see it. It was absolutely fantastic. Not quite as good as the cartoon. That really introduced me to X-Men. Not quite as good as the video game that I used to love, but X-Men was great. X-Men 2, X2, X-Men United was even better. So I was like full up ready for X-Men 3, The Last Stand. And I think that was definitely one of the worst movie-going experiences of my life. Just once you realize, oh, this is what the Juggernaut is going to be in here. Vinnie Jones seemed like a good idea. It did not work out. I'm the Juggernaut, bitch. I remember that moment being terrible. Kitty Pryde not being very good in there. Thanking Kelsey Grammer. Definitely nailing the voice for the Beast. Didn't really work out there. I think we got Angel in there, and he still sucked too. There are just so many bad things about The Last Stand. But it is the character deaths. Specifically Cyclops and Professor X that really just make no sense. They come out of nowhere. Like, why did we just kill this guy off? And I just, I left the theater feeling empty. And I think the X-Men franchise as a whole is very much up and down. And as far as I'm concerned, X-Men The Last Stand is the worst. It's worse than Wolverine Origins. It's worse than Age of Apocalypse. I haven't seen Dark Phoenix. Maybe that one actually is worse, but I heard such bad things about it, I just kind of skipped it altogether. But to me, X-Men The Last Stand really stands out as just being awful. A terrible film by any metric. Next up, Green Lantern hit theaters on June 17, 2011, with Ryan Reynolds stepping into the role of Hal Jordan. On paper, this should have worked. Cosmic lore, a massive budget, and a seasoned director in Martin Campbell, but what we got was a tone-deaf, visually unappealing mess. The CGI suit was hideous, Parallax looked like a cloudy fart, and Reynolds' wisecracking didn't match the gravitas the character deserved. The script lacked direction, the world building was weak, and the emotional core was non-existent. Green Lantern didn't just flop, it became a cautionary tale for how not to launch a cinematic universe. I remember it being such a big deal. Like, I think there was like Entertainment Magazine, Entertainment Weekly, I think is actually what it was. And you see that cover with Ryan Reynolds in like the CGI weird suit, and you think, it's not going to look that bad. And you go to watch the movie, like, oh, it's fucking worse. That suit was awful. And Ryan Reynolds just wasn't Hal Jordan. He was Hannibal Caine from Blade Trinity, and Hannibal Caine and Blade Trinity kind of saves the movie. But Hannibal Caine and Green Lantern posing as Hal Jordan fucking kind of just sunk it. There's one redeeming quality about the film, is that the stuff that they do on Oa with like Kilowog and Mark Strong as Sinestro actually kind of works. Like, they explain the Green Lantern lore really well, which in theory, should have been the hardest part of the entire fucking movie, but it's the one thing they kind of got right. And going the stupid fucking Galactus cloud route with Parallax was a really terrible idea. But I also thought that the Hector Hammonds reveal was probably worse than all of it. Oh god, it just looks so bad. Nothing about this movie, other than the Oa stuff, really lands. But in theory, it should have been kind of good. It feels like Ryan Reynolds should be able to do Hal Jordan. A little bit of a wise ass, but a very stoic, very heroic character. And he just kind of misses it completely. But then the Mark Strong casting of Sinestro was even better. And they fucking ruined that. We'll never get Mark Strong as Sinestro again. So they had some good casting choices. But that movie was just a complete mess. It looked so bad. I couldn't imagine it. Although I should have been able to after seeing that Entertainment Weekly fucking cover. It just looked so bad and it looked worse than the movie. That was when we realized a lot of these DC movies were going to be in real trouble, which brings us to number 3. Released March 25th, 2016, Zack Snyder's Batman v Superman had sky-high expectations and collapsed under the weight of its own ambition. The film is dour, bloated, and takes itself far too seriously. Instead of building chemistry between Batman and Superman, it throws them into conflict with zero emotional foundation. Jesse Eisenberg's twitchy, erratic Lex Luthor baffled audiences, and the infamous Martha moment instantly became internet meme fodder. Rather than uniting the DC heroes in a meaningful way, the movie felt like a corporate checklist, rushing to catch up to Marvel without laying the groundwork. And that is definitely what ultimately fails Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, is that the MCU was doing well, actually doing great. They'd already had their Avengers movie at this time. And then Warner Brothers was like, oh, fuck, we should do a Justice League movie. We got to jump to a Justice League movie instead of doing Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman 2, maybe an Aquaman movie, and then getting to Justice League, laying the foundation like they did within the Marvel Cinematic Universe by going Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, is it Captain America, then Thor, then I think Iron Man 3? They lay all the foundation before you actually get into that Avengers movie, and you're super excited for all these heroes to team up. You never get that. You didn't even get a fucking Batman movie. How did we not get a standalone Ben Affleck Batman movie? Why did we jump right to Batman v Superman? And that was another case of great casting that was completely ruined. And freaking Henry Cavill, because this is basically the moment that the DCEU really goes off the rails, when they jump the shark, go right to Batman v Superman, and decide that they're going to incorporate like elements of the Dark Knight Returns and Death as Superman into one fucking movie. Those are $2 billion movies, you jackasses. Why would you put them into one? Another reason why Zack Snyder was ultimately a terrible choice to shepherd and lead the DCEU. Obviously, it didn't really end up going anywhere. There were a couple of hits. But this thing was an absolute train wreck. And the worst thing about it, even worse than the Martha, why did you say that name? Like bullcrap moment, which was absolutely embarrassing, was the Jesse Eisenberg Lex Luthor. I guess they saw him in The Social Network or whatever, and were like, yeah, we want our Lex Luthor to be Mark Zuckerberg. So why don't we just get the guy who portrayed Mark Zuckerberg and we'll have him be Lex Luthor, and he'll be nothing like Lex Luthor whatsoever. That guy, that version of Lex Luthor, nobody would have ever followed him anywhere. No one would have ever turned on Superman. He never would have made a great point because he was such a, it's just like a fucking weasel. And then there was that like stupid like Granny's iced tea, peach tea lemonade joke with the fucking senator before he blows her up. Oh God. I remember I was talking to my buddy James, and he's a big comic book fan, certainly a big comic book movie fan. I was like, we got to get opening night tickets to Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. It's the kickoff of the Justice League. And I felt like the world's biggest dumbass because he didn't particularly want to go because he was going to have to take his wife and kids and it was going to be very expensive. And I had to apologize to him afterwards. I'm like, I'm sorry, man. I could not have anticipated this movie would be that terrible. And then like they start introducing the entire Justice League and they've already got like the comic book like fucking logos. Like Bruce Wayne just invented them for him or something like that. What just a mess that movie was. Absolutely awful. Even worse than Green Lantern, in my opinion, and worse than X-Men The Last Stand. Not as disappointing as X-Men The Last Stand because X2 was so freaking good. But that was bad. Now let's get to what I consider the two worst comic book movies of all time. Debuting on February 17, 2023, Ant-Man The Wasp: Quantumania was supposed to be the launchpad for King the Conqueror and the next phase of the MCU. Instead, it delivered a bloated, visually muddied film that sidelined its lead characters and replaced charm with exposition. The quantum realm never feels real. The story is overloaded with setup, and MODOK has turned into an unfunny joke. Even Jonathan Majors' performance as Kang couldn't salvage the movie's confused tone. This was a franchise that once leaned into humor and heart, but Quantumania forgot both. And I wasn't really jazzed to see this movie. In fact, I didn't want to see it at all at this point. I was kind of burnt out on the MCU, and I did not like Ant-Man and the Wasp. I actually took my wife to a date to go see that movie, and we both walked out like, God, why did we waste our 2 hours on that fucking mess? It just wasn't very good. But little did I know that Quantumania was going to make Ant-Man and the Wasp look like fucking Citizen Kane in comparison. What a absolute nightmare this is. It opens up, obviously you're following up on Endgame, where Scott Lang, Ant-Man, is literally the linchpin. He's the one thing that happens that without him, none of that story can happen. You can't save the universe. You can't undo. You can't reacquire all the Infinity Stones. You can't undo what Thanos did. You can't return everybody without Scott Lang, fucking Ant-Man. And they open up and they just treat him like complete shit, even though he's literally the one character that ultimately you could say single-handedly like saved the entire Marvel universe. Without him, none of it was possible. And they just made him this enormous joke because he wrote a book about saving the world. Who else should write the fucking book? Iron Man's dead at this point. Captain America's like 95 years old. He's got fucking dementia. Ant-Man would have wrote the book. It only made sense. And then they just kind of crap on him. And that's what they do the entire movie. They end up in the quantum realm. Obviously, they'd lost Janet Van Dyne in the quantum realm. They go and they find her. For some reason, Bill Murray's there. Just talk about how many times he's fucked her right in front of Hank Pym. I was like losing my mind. I was like, this is awful. You have Bill fucking Murray and you can't even write a joke. I couldn't believe how bad the movie was, but it hadn't even gotten started yet. It somehow got worse. Enough said. MODOK. I still can't believe it. That was the worst interpretation of a kind of stupid character from Marvel Comics that I could have imagined. And then you defeated Kang, the big villain that you set up in that Loki show that was supposed to be your next fucking Thanos, with Ant-Man the Wasp and a bunch of ants. You just took him out. You wiped him out. And this wasn't like the normal Kang. This was the really bad Kang that the original Kang that we met in Loki was warning about that was going to destroy the entire fucking world. Took him out. I still can't believe what an enormous misstep that was. And I had no intention of ever watching that. But Aaron and I were dared to watch it and review it right here on the channel. And I wish I hadn't, because that thing was an enormous wreck. Another movie that Aaron and I reviewed on the channel, because we were dared to, and I certainly wouldn't have watched it because I heard a lot of stuff about it, turned out being worse than I could have imagined. My number one pick, Thor: Love and Thunder, released July 8, 2022. Love and Thunder is the MCU's most painful self-parody. Director Taika Waititi doubled down on the comedy from Ragnarok, but here it comes at the cost of everything else. Emotional moments are undercut by slapstick. Gore the God Butcher, played by Christian Bale, is neutered by limited screen time and tonal whiplash. And then there's Russell Crowe as Zeus, whose bizarre, flamboyant performance turns a mythic figure into a joke, effectively killing any future dramatic weight the character could have had in the MCU. Love and Thunder isn't just unfunny. It's the MCU trying so hard to be quirky that it forgets how to tell a coherent story. And I do remember starting this movie, and in the first maybe 6 minutes going, I can't believe people said this was bad. This is one of the best openings for any MCU movie I've ever seen, with the introduction of Gore the God Butcher. I was like, wow, this is really great. I can't imagine this not going well. I don't care what people said. I was so bought into it. And then the entire thing just turns into the worst. I don't even know how to describe it. It's a self-parody. I mean, it's just Chris Hemsworth, a great actor that's super charismatic, really draws you in. You just kind of like him. I didn't like him in this movie because he was so off kilter and just being weird for the sake of being weird. They even include the Jane Foster Thor stuff, which in theory, coming into the movie, is the one thing I'm going to hate the most because I didn't like it in comic books and I thought it overstayed its welcome by a large part. And maybe it's the second best thing about the entire movie behind the opening scene. It wasn't good, but it wasn't as bad as fucking Zeus, played by Russell Crowe. I don't even know what that was. He just decided to make him the biggest homo in the history of fucking the universe. I don't even understand what he was going for. It wasn't funny. Nothing about this movie was funny. And not being able to utilize and translate the Gore the God Butcher story, the last great Marvel story that you could turn into a movie, and they just kind of wasted it. And they certainly wasted Christian Bale, one of the greatest actors of his generation, doing his best to make Gore the God Butcher work. And he's not even there most of the time. He barely does anything. And then, you know, at the end of your eternity and all that kind of crap. I liked Taika Waititi when he did Hunt for the Wilder People, or whatever that movie is, like that really small scale, you know, quirky comedy type thing. And he works great in that. And I didn't like Thor Ragnarok very much, also directed by Taika Waititi. But apparently giving Taika Waititi complete creative control of anything is just a recipe for disaster. I mean, Chris Hemsworth himself is, you know, talked about how they basically just started ad-libbing on the fucking set. They just started joking around the entire time, not taking anything seriously. And you get the most unfunny, unserious, lame-ass comic book superhero movie in the history of the world. I don't think, even with those brief 6 minutes at the beginning, anything about this is redeemable, because you had 6 minutes of great setup for that villain, and then you completely ruined it. Basically, you undercut everything. And I think Thor Love and Thunder is one of the biggest steaming piles of crap I've ever seen as a movie. I wish I had never seen it. And I can never look at Taika Waititi the same way. I've forgiven Chris Hemsworth. I don't think this was his fault. But I'll never forget Taika Waititi for doing something like that. That was just an abomination of the film. And it's not like Thor's been the best franchise. I think Thor is vastly underrated and is actually one of the better MCU movies they've ever made. I think Thor is great. Thor 2, The Lost World, or whatever it is terrible. Thor Ragnarok is pretty goddamn bad, and Thor Love and Thunder is atrocious. It absolutely bottomed out. And quite frankly, I don't ever want to see a Thor movie again. I don't mind Thor being an Avengers movie if it's good, but I don't need another Thor movie after Love and Thunder and what they did to that stuff. It was absolutely atrocious. So there it is. That's the list, the 5 worst comic book adaptations to movies that I personally have ever witnessed. What do you guys think should be on the list? Did you actually like any of those movies? Do you think there's something out there that's actually worse? I definitely want to hear from you guys, running down the biggest disappointments in comic book movie history. If you appreciate this kind of coverage about comic books, not just comic books, but certainly movies, television, streaming, video games, all that kind of stuff happening right here on Think Critical YouTube, and you'd like to support that mission of spotlighting comic books, the greatest storytelling medium in the history of the world, and you'd like to be part of the family, there's one place to do it. It's Think Critical Patreon. You get lots of bonus podcasts from Aaron Sparrow, Doc, Jim, 32 Flavors with Nick Weiser. Obviously, I'm there for all that kind of stuff. If you haven't checked it out, there is a link in the video description. There's a button right here. I do hope to see you there very soon.